Welcome to the Nonprofit Founders Club, where founders who have said, I have my 501c3, now what? Begins building the nonprofit they envisioned and helping the people they are called to serve, all without being the sole funder. Welcome to the Nonprofit Founders Club. I am with my friend Nancy Rieves. That is correct last name pronunciation, right?
That is right. Yeah.
Because it's spelled differently. If you're looking for, it's R-I-E-V-E-S?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's not the typical spelling. So if you're looking, it's Nancy, Nancy, and then Rieves, R-I-E-V-E-S. So good to know, because I can't tell you how many times I've searched the wrong last name.
I know.
Wrong spelling.
I know.
So anyway, I'm so glad that you're here. You are a major gifts expert. And so tell us about yourself and your business, because I know I won't get it right.
Well, I can, and I'll try to make it fairly short. You know, there's always that long version and the short version, right?
Right.
The short version first is I'm a fundraising coach. I provide overwhelmed leaders with a roadmap to raise more money through major gifts. I help nonprofit leaders bring in the big fish. That's the short of it, to bring in the big fish. And I try to do that by helping the executive and development directors. That's primarily who I help, although I have board members who are in my coaching groups and take my courses too. But it's primarily executive and development directors, or a similar title. And I help them simplify the fundraising process, because I know there's so much overwhelm and a little bit of fear and uncertainty in what to do. And then that word, major gifts, scares people. And it shouldn't. I don't want it to, because there's so much benefit in focusing on the large gifts and not being afraid of it. And knowing what to do is incredibly helpful and gets you off center and gets you traction, gets you some momentum. So that's what I focus on. And so let me back up and give a little longer story on why I focus on large gifts, because my story is important to how I landed here. First of all, I didn't plan to be a fundraiser at all. I didn't plan to focus on fundraising at all. I'm telling you, at all. It was the furthest thing from my mind. I was teaching business classes at a college in Arkansas, and the college president was having a problem with the executive director had conflicts, butting of heads with the board chair, and it's just kind of a political thing. And he said, Nancy, you're not political, you're apolitical. So, hey, can you help me out? And I said, I don't know anything about fundraising. I don't know anything about nonprofit work. I don't know anything about college foundation. I was teaching business classes, marketing classes, and freshman orientation classes, things like that. And I did accreditation for the college. So, really, fundraising was not in the conversation with me. He asked me 3 times. He came back a little bit later, a couple of months later, and asked me if I'd thought about it. And I said, no, I have not thought about it, because it's not something I'm interested in. I'm not good at. I don't know anything about it. Then he came back a 3rd time and said, I need you. I've got this issue, and you would be great, and I'll help you. I'll send you to training. And I could tell he was like in a pickle. He just needed help. And I said, okay, if you'll send me to training. And then here's the funny thing, Alicia, is I said, I don't like asking people for money. So I'll do everything. I'll learn everything if you'll do the asking. And he said, okay, I'll do that. Well, that didn't last long. Once I got into training and going to conferences, and we didn't have the Zoom like we do today. And I learned what fundraising was really about. And it was about my being the conduit between those who have the means to give and those in need. The communities or people or animals, it's whatever's in need, who or what in need. And then those who have the means to give and the heart for giving. I was just that middle person. So when I learned that, everything changed for me in how I thought about fundraising and how I approached my job. It wasn't like, nope, not going to do that. I'll leave it up to somebody else. And so that's one huge part of my story, because I really did not like asking for money. No, nothing. I wanted nothing to do with it. And then the second big part of why I landed on major gifts is I was working on my doctorate dissertation. I was in the doctorate program. I had not selected my dissertation work. So I was a year into this new position. And I thought, well, if I'm going to do this, I should do something about fundraising. So my doctorate dissertation was analyzing fundraising activities and comparing them and seeing what organizations were bringing in money. And what I'm getting ready to say is those who focused on large gifts and planned gifts, large gifts lead to planned gifts. It's such an easy transition and a very easy thing to do. That's not a scary part either. And I just saw it. It was on paper. I mean, it was like I would tear open. We didn't have online surveys. This was 15 years ago, something like that. Yeah. And I would tear open those surveys that would come in, and it was like Christmas. I couldn't wait to get that survey open. It was just so clear of those who would focus on large gifts and not focus on small revenue generating activities, just selling tickets and doing events, but really capitalizing on the relationships. The money was significantly bigger. So when I started at a position, this is my third point. See, this is my long story, is when I started at my position, someone asked me to come in and start the foundation of almost 100-year-old organization. They didn't have a fundraising centralized, and they wanted a separate 501c3, a foundation board. And so just like a college foundation. So when I was brought in to start that, I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to focus on large gifts. All relationships, large gifts. Now, doesn't mean small gifts and other people aren't important and aren't loved and aren't cherished, but I really focused my attention on the large gifts. And when I did that, we raised over $16 million in less than 10 years. And that was starting with, I didn't have staff. I mean, we filed the paperwork and had nothing. I mean, we had no board, we had no bylaws, we had no policies in place. And so that was raising $16 million starting from nothing. And when I left, I had 12 people under me, marketing, and I had 2 other fundraisers, focused on philanthropy. They were called Director of Philanthropy. So I built it from the ground up and really focused on large gifts. And that's why I focus on the large gifts. And I really believe it's not a hard process. If you can grasp it and understand what it's about, then it's not hard. It's not scary. And I'm the living, breathing proof that it's really not scary, because I did it and it was a lot of fun.
There's 2 things that you said that really resonate with me. First of all, that whole the fundraiser is actually the connectional person between those that want to do good and those that are actually doing good on the front lines. And so, and I think every fundraiser has to come to that point in their thinking that it's like, this is not begging. This is not any of that. This is me being a connectional piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
And
you're exactly right.
So that's awesome. And then you had another point, about major gifts being such a huge part of fundraising. And it is. And when you include it into a very diverse fundraising plan, you can raise a whole lot more money than you ever thought possible.
Right.
So, and a lot of people think of major donors as, really, really rich people. Bill Gates, Oprah Winfrey, But this audience that we're talking to mainly today is founders of nonprofits. So could you explain what a major donor is so that they can get up to speed on the terminology?
Absolutely. And saying that, Alicia, hats off to all these founders. I mean, there's some mission, there's something that the founders in your group want to change. The reason there's a nonprofit is because there's either a problem or a need that needs to be addressed. So that's what your group is doing, whatever it is, that problem or need that's being addressed. So hats off to the founders in your group for doing this. I love that you're focused on this and helping this group. I wish I had you many years ago, Alicia, years ago. So your question is, what is a major gift? Well, major gifts, the short answer, I love the short answers. Major gifts are the largest gifts an organization receives. That's the simplest form of what a major gift is. It's the largest gifts your organization receives. Now, let's break that down. First of all, every organization is different. It's not the same for everyone. The one organization, it might be $1,000. Someone else, it may be $10,000 is considered the threshold for a major gift. The way I look at it is in a quick formula. This is the easiest and the quickest, and don't get caught up in the exact science. And this is an internal purpose, is why you want to know what is a major gift at your organization, is so that you know where to focus your time, a big portion of your time. Because like you said, you have diverse fundraising. You've got pools, you've got pipelines, and those are important, but you definitely want to dedicate a good portion of your time to large gifts. So the way I look at it, and let's use simple math here. Let's say an organization has 100 donors in your database. So if you take those 100 donors, typically the top 10% of those donors, of your donors in your database, are your top giving donors. Those are your large gifts. And usually there's a break. So it might be the top 8%. It might be the top 12%, maybe 15%. It could be that 80-20 Pareto principle rule where it's the top 20%. But it's usually, studies show it's somewhere around 10%, give or take. So if you took your top 10 donors and you looked at that 10%, there's probably a natural break. So you might have a lot of $25, $50, $100 gifts. And then you kind of creep up to a $500 gift. And then you have quite a few $1,000 gifts, and then a $5,000, maybe one $10,000 gift. And let's say you're a brand new organization. It might look like that. So I would say your threshold on that example of an organization is $1,000. That's your threshold, is what you consider a major gift. So that means that's really where you're going to focus, those who have the means to give at that level or more. So a major gift is the largest gifts coming to your organization, typically the top 10% in your database. Does that make sense?
It does. Now, are you looking at the average that a donor gives? You're looking at just the gifts.
Yes. And I would take it over at least a 1-year period, ideally a 3-year period. That's a great question, Alicia, is I would look over a 3-year period, because you'll get some outliers, although I don't really like the outliers. I like them to come in and never leave. You don't want to ever lose a donor. So
right.
When they come in, you want them to stay and keep giving, not just a one-off. So
the important takeaway really here is that you get to define what that looks like for your organization.
Yeah. And the example I gave, those $500 gifts, they're not important. I mean, they're all important, but they're kind of that transitional. You still look at those because they're probably testing the water. I always think everyone's testing the water. Those $25 gifts, you're a person who can give largely is probably not going to make their first gift their largest gift. It's not likely. A lot of times people just really want to test the waters to see how you treat them, to see what you do with your money, to make sure you do what you say you're going to do with the money. So they're testing the waters to see if you're really making an impact in how you treat them. Is there gratitude there? Or is the relationships strengthened over time? Things like that. So that's why all gifts are important. But you only have so much time in a day. So I always want my donors, my students and my members in my groups to focus on those large gifts and be moving the needle on those all the time.
Right. So I think we kind of already talked about this, but let's just clarify the criteria that you would suggest founders to use to identify who their major donors are.
Actually, I have a 3-point test on identifying. That's a great, yeah. No, I'm glad you came back to that. I have a 3-point test to identify a large gift donor. So we identified what is a large gift at your organization. So now let's identify who needs to be on your list to be potentials or prospects, whichever word you want to use. The first one is not going to surprise you, and it's hands down number 1 is they have to be passionate about your cause. Now, they're there's evidence of passion in lots of ways. One is they showed up in an event, they paid $25 for a raffle. I mean, there's something, they opened their wallet. Now, sometimes that doesn't always tell you it's just because a friend asked and they wanted to go to this, auction, or they wanted to go to a chili cook-off and they really love chili. And that, there could be, you'd have to be careful, but there's some kind of indicator they opened their wallet. That's number one. And we can come back to passion and dig deeper on that. But think about that, just passion. There's something. They've made a comment on social media about something, or, just I always say that a donor's passion leaves breadcrumbs. I think you just watch what their activities are, things that they say, comments they make. If they're asking questions about something, that means they're curious more about your beneficiaries or what you do or how you do it. So listening is really important. So passion is one. Number two is they must have the means to give. And that's great that you asked that first question is, what is a major gift? So now in our example, we established it as $1,000 is considered the threshold for a major gift. So you have to have some indication that they can give at that level. They've given to other organizations like yours, or that's the biggest. A little bit of lifestyle. I'm careful about that because some people, their lifestyle doesn't match the depth. They may be leveraged. And I think we talked about this before. A person may be in debt and leveraged and they're living a lavish lifestyle and they really don't have the means. But just watch for indicators of the means to give without going too deep there. And the last one is a person must be philanthropic. And that almost seems like a no-brainer that, of course, people must be philanthropic, but not everyone is philanthropic. So really keep your antenna up about people who are philanthropic. Just because someone is wealthy does not mean they are philanthropic. Doesn't mean they have a heart for giving. And I know that seems odd in our world because if we're in nonprofit work, we want to change the world. We want to change our community. We want to beat cancer. We want to do, there's things, we want to change the world. There's just no doubt. I want to change our community. And we think everyone has a heart for giving. It is not true. And I found out the hard way in several instances. So that's really important to watch for people's heart for giving and their indicators for that as well.
Right. So in case someone isn't familiar with the term philanthropic, how would you define that? How would you explain that?
I think the definition, I remember looking it up before, it has to do with humankind. Is wanting to help humankind. I always say it's just a heart for giving.
Yeah.
You want to change the world, or you want to beat, you want to beat something. That's why there's either a need or a problem to address that changes someone's life, or it changes a community, or changes, animals are in that mix. But it's the love of mankind, I think, is actually the definition of philanthropy, is the love of mankind or humankind. That probably sums it up. Yeah.
So they're just willing to give.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. There's a lot of people that aren't.
Yeah, believe it or not. And I think it's foreign. It's a foreign thought in our world, isn't it? To think that there are people who just don't want to help others. So.
Or it's just not a priority. I think for a lot of people, that's just how it is. It's not a priority. It's not a priority in their budgets. It's not a priority in their life. I believe that when you start getting older, it starts becoming more of a priority because it becomes, how am I going to leave this world? When I'm gone, how am I going to make sure it was better? Yeah. And I think what we do in nonprofit work is certainly attractive.
Yes. And, several thoughts on that is I think as people do get older, they start to realize what's important in life. I think, and it's just, I guess, just part of maturing is, right out of college, we've got to find our footing on who we are and what we want to do with our life. And so we're building a legacy, we're building our talents or trying to figure it out and build, a family, and everything's focused, and it should be focused on raising our family, making sure we have funds to send them to college and, make ends meet. And so it's certainly understandable. You want people that should be their focus. But there's a point in kind of the 55-year-old and older is when I think people think, I have all that I need. I mean, more things are not going to make me happy. I mean, if I could buy an island, would that make me happy? The happiness test that we hear about. And I was reading, someone mentioned it again this weekend. It was the happiness test. Well, would that new car make you happy in 3 months, in 6 months, in a year? I mean, I just want a car that runs, right?
Right.
So it's the happiness test. And people, I think, start to realize that as they get older. And then the legacy part, they want to leave the world in a better place. And they don't necessarily want to start a nonprofit. There's a lot of work, as your audience knows. There's a lot of work. They're thrilled that someone else started a nonprofit to address this need. Let me contribute to that. Let me help them. So it is a great thing, and those members of your community who have started a nonprofit, philanthropists are thrilled that they started the nonprofit. They want to contribute. Their intention is not to start a nonprofit. They want to give. They're thrilled that the nonprofit was started.
Right. Because it's a whole lot easier for them to write that check and to feel good about it.
Yeah.
Than it is to do the work, that the founder feels so passionate about. So
yeah. And if they have the means to give, I mean, they're thrilled that the nonprofit is there, and it's something that they are very passionate about.
Yeah, because the right people want to give. It's not pulling teeth. It's not about making them do something they don't want to do.
Right.
They want to do it. They just need to be asked to do it.
Exactly. You're right.
So can you give us a few pointers on how to talk to a major donor?
Yes. How to talk to a major donor. I know that seems scary because when we say that word, and actually I'm changing my words just to relax people a bit, is large donors, large gift donors. Maybe just let's get away from the word major donors, because that is the word we use in our industry, but how to talk with large gift donors. And again, we've defined it at a certain level. It might be 500, it might be 1,000, it might be 5,000. So whatever that threshold is, that's not too scary. We're not talking about asking someone for $1 million right off. That may come later, but let's get, tested a bit, and let's get comfortable asking. So start at that threshold amount. So really the first thing to think about when you're thinking about talking with donors, large gift donors, is to keep the donor central in your thoughts. When I say that, I mean, take the focus off of you. When I said I didn't want anything to do with asking people for money, when the college president asked me to oversee the foundation, all the thought was on me. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't do that. I've never done that before. I'm not prepared. All the thought was on me. And I was not focused on the needs and the people that being that conduit. The scholarship students, that's what I was focused on, is getting scholarships for students. And those who had the means to support scholarships. There were lots of people who wanted to support scholarships. So focus on the donor. Keep them central in your mind. That leads to number 2 is look for dots that you connect. Okay? So you're not going to just walk up to somebody, a stranger, and just start talking about your mission. You're going to talk to someone who maybe you don't know well and ask them about something they are an expert in, something they know about. You see, I'm taking the focus off of me and focusing on the potential donor. That's so important here. And if I had done that from the very beginning, I would have gone faster than it took me to understand fundraising. Then you want to think about asking for advice. So once you figure out what the dots are that you're trying to connect, you want to ask for advice in their area of expertise or something they know about. You may not consider them an expert, but a lot of times they're an expert in an area, or just something they know about, if that makes more sense, something they know a little bit more about than you, or they've had experience with. That kind of makes them an expert. And then the last pointer is be yourself. Always be yourself. Don't try to do it like fundraising or conversations with a donor like me or you, Alicia. But it's be you. Make sure you're being you. It's so important. And Alicia, I have a funny story that pops in my head. You may have heard me tell this, but it is so classic, and it tells the story. This has nothing to do with fundraising, but you'll see what I mean when I tell this. My husband and I were at a lake house of a friend's, and so they let us use their lake house. It was actually Labor Day weekend. This is many years ago, like 20 years ago, and so someone knocked on the door and said, "Hey, we're having a gathering of people in the neighborhood. I know you're visiting here, but the more the merrier. We just invite you to come on down if you want to. It's tomorrow at 11 o'clock. Just come on." And so we thought, okay, well, that'll be fun. We don't know anybody here. We're just guests in the area of this cabin. So we went, and we were talking to different people and chatting, and kind of in a circle of probably 8 or 10 or 12 people. And so I introduced myself, and then this gentleman people were kind of talking to, and I said my name, and he said, "Oh, I'm John Grisham." And I said, "Well, that's an easy name to remember. The famous writer from Mississippi." And I just laughed, and I said, "That's an easy name to remember." He was an older gentleman. He's just so kind. And so I ended up talking with him just by himself and chatting about his family and just where he was from. I didn't know him. He didn't know me. So I got back to the cabin, and my husband said, "Oh my gosh, you got to know Mr. Grisham. How was that conversation?" I said, "He is so nice. It was enjoyable to talk with him." And I said, "Who all did you visit with?" or something like that. And he said, "You do know who he was, don't you?" And I said, "Well, no." He said, "That's John Grisham, the writer's dad." And I said, "Oh my gosh, I did not know that." And he said, "Yes." And then the next day, Alicia, I went to this local coffee shop, and he and his wife were in there. And I walk in the door, and he's waving his hand, calling my name like we're best friends. Tells me to come over, come over. And of course, I know him then. And I feel like a different person because now I know who he is. And I'm just like, and probably not like I was the day before. The point of this, what the point of this is. I was myself. I didn't know who he was. And I was relaxed, and I was just chatty and just having small talk with people who were in the neighborhood that invited us over. So I say that to a point is, if you are introduced to a large gift donor, a major donor, don't freak out and not be yourself. Just be who you are and get to know you. And you want to feel that best friends like he was with me. The funny thing is, probably all the other people there knew who he was, and I didn't, and they shied away from him, or they couldn't be themselves, or all they wanted to do is ask about their one son, the son. And I was taught there was a daughter and there were other family members. I just wasn't focused on that one son of his, and I was chatting with him about other things. That's the point. It's really key to be yourself as a fundraiser and connect with people and connect with them on a personal level. And don't feel like that you're always after their money. You're interested in them as a person and not their pocketbook. And that needs to come through. And people can sniff out a phony or someone who's not being themselves or is not relaxed, but is being guarded. I want people to be professional, but be yourself, and learn and think about that when you're meeting people and talking with people. Just be you.
Right.
You're the only person can have that genuine conversation.
Yeah, I knew someone in the fundraising world who was an agenda for them.
Yeah.
Every handshake, there was an agenda. And people smelt it. They knew, and they ran. It was like, we don't want anything to do with whatever agenda they're trying to push, because you feel like you've got a target on your back.
Yes.
But whenever you can genuinely like people and just come at it from, I'm just interested in you,
right,
and who you are. I don't really want anything from you. I want to get to know you.
Right. That's great.
That makes a conversation a whole lot more open.
Yeah, and it makes you, the fundraiser, relax. Like, I'm not here to ask him for money. Just get in your mind. I'm just here to get to know Mr. and Miss Jones. I just want to get to know them. I'm not here to ask them for money. I might ask them for advice or their thoughts on something, but it's not about the money. I know that seems wrong. It's counterintuitive. Because you're a fundraiser, you're trying to, you have to have money to survive, the organization to survive. But it's counterintuitive. You've got to be yourself and get to know people as human beings. And that goes for foundation representative and corporate representatives. They're human beings. They're human beings. And you really approach fundraising with all groups just like that, as human beings, and not as I'm coming after to submit a grant or submit something. I first want to get to know you and how are you, that kind of feel.
Right. And when you do that, you're building a relationship. And there will come a point in time in the relationship, or not. I mean, depends on the relationship. But there will come a point where it will be easy to ask. It will be just fluid. I mean, you won't think twice about it because you've built that rapport. You've gone 100 times and not asked. But this is something that is right up their alley. They are going to love it. You'll actually be excited to tell them about it because it's like, I know you're going to love this.
That's exactly right.
And that's what people miss a lot of times when they're talking fundraising, is that it's not an ATM. It's not a transaction. It's not hard when you've put in the work to begin with.
Right. Yeah. And, you're right. I think so many times, again, we're focused on us and we're fearful to ask, or it's that money tree feel, and we're focused on them and we're not focused on them in the right light as human beings. But a lot of times we are building the relationship and we do forget it. It is time to ask. We are a nonprofit and they're expecting you to ask them. If you've been cultivating them and having conversations and it's been 6 months, a year, or I'd say a year, I always say that's a good number, especially a large gift. I mean, there's no good formula for that time frame. It's the quality of that relationship. And there's the art of fundraising is you do have to, listen to your gut or be intuitive on that. But a lot of times as fundraisers, especially if we're new, is we aim and we cultivate and we cultivate and cultivate, and we don't ever ask. And they know what you do for a living. That's where they know you're head of a nonprofit or you're a fundraiser, and they know you need money. And really, you're hurting yourself by not asking because they think, well, they're not really a good fundraiser. They're not asking me. They've been talking with me for a year and they know what I'm passionate about, and they're not asking. So you're not doing yourself a favor by not asking. They expect you to. They're philanthropists. They're givers. They have a heart for service and they want to be asked.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And you miss the mark if you aren't in that mindset that it's okay to ask.
Yeah.
It's not begging. It is so not begging. I actually had a boss one time who I think he meant it jokingly, that he was the head of begging, but I always cringed inside because it was like, but that's what they expect. It doesn't help us.
No.
To have that mindset or that mentality, or to make light of that mindset.
No. I guess he was just, being transparent of how people often feel. I had a board member who teasingly, when I walked up to him, and there were a couple other people standing with him, and I said, hello, and he said, hi, Nancy, and he grabbed his back pocket, like, I'm going to hang on to my back pocket. I know what you're after. And of course, I, laughed and poked at him. I said, ha ha, But, he didn't do it again. I think he thought, okay, maybe that wasn't so good to do that to Nancy. He was a board member. He was very passionate about our cause. He That's when actually when you've really gotten to know your board members or your donors, and they do jokingly things like that. That's actually a good sign.
Yeah.
Yeah. They relax with you. Yeah.
Yeah. So as we wrap this up, where can we find out more about you and what you have to offer? I know you've got something coming up, so I want to make sure that you get that in there too.
Yes. So I'm always offering free things because my background is teaching. I taught at a college, and so I love teaching. So I'll teach on a whim on something I hear or I get lots of questions about, and I'll do a workshop on it. So anytime I have a workshop or a training, it is at fundraisingmaximized.com/fundraising. That's where you can find my latest training, and that's where you can go right now to see my next training that's coming up very, very soon. And then just to my website is fundraisingmaximized.com. And if you go to my website, you'll see in the top right-hand corner a bright green button that says Get My Free Plan. I think that's what it says. It's a bright green button, Get Free Plan. And that is a fundraising plan template that I always love to share with people. It's the system that I teach, and it's a good framework to start with. If you don't have a fundraising plan, or if you have one, take a look what I have developed as a template, because you'll find maybe some holes in yours, and you can use mine to get those juices flowing, or you can just use the system I have. So be sure and go to fundraisingmaximized.com and look for the bright green button in the top right-hand corner and get your free plan, get your free fundraising plan. That's number one.
Awesome. Okay. And you are on LinkedIn, correct?
Yes, I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Those are my primary. I believe every nonprofit leader should be on LinkedIn. It is professionals hang out. And so I'm definitely on LinkedIn, but you'll find me in the other places too. But I have a YouTube channel. I forget that. I love doing videos. So I have a YouTube channel, just fundraisingmaximized.com. Should be able to find me that way. And please subscribe to that. And find me on your favorite social media channel, right?
Right.
and follow me. However you like to digest news or digest anything that has to do with fundraising, you'll find me there. So please do follow me and join me in my free trainings. They're interactive, and there's time to ask questions. And I always share what I have going on as far as my teachings. And really core to what I do, Alicia, is, and I know you know this, is I have a course. It is an 8-week course. It's 8 modules. And you can either go through it with me walking along beside you with group coaching for 8 weeks, or you can go on your own. So I give it those two options on that 8-week course. And it is from A to Z, how to raise money through large gifts. I take you from first how to create your message, how to create a prospect list, how to cultivate your donors, how to ask them for money, and then how to steward them. In a nutshell, that's the process. So I handhold. I teach you step by step how to do that. And that's through that course. And then I do group coaching. I hop on a call to make sure you're right for group coaching. And then I have group coaching calls that I do weekly. Some are weekly and some are every other week. Depends on which one you decide to do. So it's primarily, again, executive directors and development directors or a similar title. And then I have some board members, and I have brand new people in fundraising. And then I have experienced fundraisers. I have one person that changed jobs, and she really wanted to have a fundraising coach help her to make sure she got off on the right foot. And she's very experienced, knows what she's doing, but she just having that someone there beside you if she had any questions or to give advice and talk through, be that sounding board. So that's my world of how I teach nonprofits. And they're mostly small to medium sized. I think you're the same way, aren't you, Alicia? Small to medium sized nonprofits.
Well, I'm like tiny to small. So small is where we overlap.
Yeah. Mine are small. They are primarily small. There's sometimes one person show, and then some have a little bit of more in their end. But it's the same. It really is. If you're a one person show, if you have a couple of people, if you've grown a bit, need help and you need advice and you need guidance and you want to make sure you got the basics down, that's really what I like teaching, is making sure you got the basics down. You can always grow and get experience, but sometimes you never got the basics and you want to go back and make sure you do. So it works for everybody.
Yeah, and making sure that you're focusing on the right things, because if you're not spending at least a little bit of time with your major or your large gift donors, then you won't get as much money as you could, or you'll get as much, but you're going to be doing so much more work than you need to. So it's good to find that mix and that time allocation, because founders are so overwhelmed. They're doing everything. Everything.
Yeah. And a really good point there, Alicia, at the end here is why focus on large gifts? Large gifts can carry your organization. And there's numerous studies that show the impact of large gift fundraisers can have on an organization. It really is that 80-20-90-10 rule that top group carries the bulk of the funding for an organization that's healthy. Now, there's always anomalies. There's always, you may think, oh, I know this organization that all they do is annual gifts. All they do is annual gifts. That's great, but I'll tell you, I think they're leaving money on the table if that's the case. There's more money there. So, I hate to see fundraisers leave money on the table when there's donors out there that if they were asked at a certain level to give to a certain project or overall, you can give to overall. It's just as wonderful. And that's what often we like. We want to cover all those costs. They're waiting to be asked. They want to be asked, and they have the means to give, and they have the heart. They're passionate about your organization. Those are the 3-point test. And it works. It works.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for doing this with me. I so appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And as always, it's so informative. And so for those of you joining us, thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Thank you, Alicia. Thank you for having me. I always love our conversations. We could go on for hours. We could just go on for hours. So thank you for having me. Enjoy this and look forward to more conversation.
That's it for the Nonprofit Founders Club podcast. Hit subscribe so you won't miss the next episode. In the meantime, keep building your nonprofit so you can help those you are called to serve.